العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله.
There's a next topic that I wanted to move on to, and this is in regards to the locations of the Hanabila. And what I want to ask is, we mentioned that the Gulf countries are based upon Al-Buhuti, and we mentioned in Sham, and we mentioned Egypt. We have the scholars and the books. Now, what are the institutes? Where are we looking at actually? Where do we go to?
Okay. Alhamdulillah. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. So when we talk about institutes to go to study, I think one of the things that needs to be kept in mind about this topic is that the Hanabila didn't build institutes per se. They tended to build masajid and madaris.
Inshallah.
And the reason why they built masajid and madaris is because, or ma'ahid, is because of the fact of being able to mix with the people, to be around the people, and to also avoid, because when you started talking about institutional structures,
Right.
you started talking about the government.
Definitely.
And the Hanabila tended to almost always, their funding was coming from private donors. And they maintained a level of independence that I think the other schools, probably outside of the Malikis, weren't able to really maintain without being associated with the government. So for example, in Iraq, in Al-Anbar province, okay, Iraq and Al-Anbar province, they're Hanabila, any of the masajid that you want to go to sit in and listen to Zadul Mustaqni, you can go, right? Now, if you're looking at a particular institution, Al-Mustansiriya still does fiqh there. The main Jami in Baghdad still does the Hanbali fiqh there where you can study, right? But it's not a particular institution that's called after something. Now, if you look in Philistine, Al-Jami Al-Hanbali, for obvious reasons, they're teaching this, right? The Jami Al-Hanabila in Damascus, they're teaching when they're not getting raided by the government and other issues are happening, right? Duma, Ruhayba, right? The Ghouta province, that is a place where someone can study the fiqh. In Egypt, at Al-Azhar, right? You can study the fiqh with very, very few interruptions, very few problems. In the Gulf, Qatar, this is referred, the royal family refers to this as the madhhab of the kingdom, right? So that is the only acceptable, its rulings are the only acceptable rulings for the most part. So you can find people to study with there. There are Marja people there. The great Imam Muhammad Abdul Aziz Mani came from there, right? Kuwait as well has this. Kuwait is a hop, skip, and a jump from Iraq, right? You also have Az-Zubayr, which is in Al-Basra province. This is another location where people study from. The great Imam Abdullah Nuri also studies from here. The Gulf, one of the places, Al-Qasim, Bukhari and Al-Qasim is a place where the fiqh is studied in these other places. The Najd has the place where these places are studied. So there are places all over to study, but if you said a name, there's not a specific name because it's not their methodology to name places. What tends to happen, and we still do, is it'll be the masjid or the house of the particular imam, where he'll open his house up or what have you. It's not a name per se, right? Although they might give them names. So it's like I studied at 2 masjids, right, in London, but collectively it got called Mahad an-Nur, right? But it was 2 masjids, right? And then we'd go home with teachers sometimes as well. So I'd stay for 2 weeks and we go through kutub. It's like, so it wasn't like that. Now Allah blessed me to have been able to benefit from the teachers that I benefited with, right? Versus, say, if I went to an institution. Sometimes what happens is if you go into an institution, I think there's part of the good thing of going into an institution is when you go to an institution, you have expectations of conformity that are expected. When you go to an institution, that's the good part about it, is there's expectations. The downside to it, though, is when you go into an institution, there's a danger that you get cut off from the rest of the people. That's the only issue, is you get cut off because you become remote from the people. That's my only concern. Versus, and also when you have a setup that's not institutional based, teachers can put more, and this can be either bad or good. Teachers can put more responsibility on you. When you have an institution, there's a specific set curriculum that you go through. When you don't have an institution, you have a set curriculum that you can go to, but the teacher can make adjustments. So sometimes we'd be told, I want 5 pages by tomorrow. Sometimes 1 page. Sometimes I want 1 page tomorrow for hifz and 1 for review. So we have deadlines that we have to meet, but there were adjustments that teachers could make. So for example, if somebody shows up in Anbar province and is like, oh, I want to study Hanbali Fiqh, they will be able to study. They'll be assigned to a teacher or whatever else. They'll find someone. Or if they just turn up in Duma and they go to Al-Jami al-Kabir and they're like, I want to study Hanbali Fiqh, they'll get looked after. Or they show up in Dumayr, I want to study, or I show up in Ruhayba, I want to study Hanbali Fiqh, right? Or anywhere in Ghouta, they're like, listen, I want to study this. They'll get looked after, right? You know, the Shati family, although Isam al-Din, rahimahullah, died, the Shati family is still alive. Their name is still alive. You know, in Damascus, they're like, yeah, I want to study the fiqh of Imam Ahmed. Okay. Look at, but you'll wind up either going home or it'll be a local masjid that you go to. I won't have a name. So when people ask me, I will usually mention Mahad al-Nur, or I'll mention like the particular masjids that I study, because it's not an institution per se, but what I did is accredited. What I did, it can't be denied. I got ijazas for what I did. I got SNE'd for what I did, but it won't be the same. Like, for example, I don't put something on the end of my name, right? Someone might put like Al-Azhari, right? Or Al-Qayrawani on the end of the name, because that's an institutional structure. The only thing I'm interested in is what's on the end of my name, Al-Hanbali. That's all I care about.
It's interesting, right, that the Hanabal actually still follow the same method that the Salaf had, which was teaching at the masjid.
Well, you have to remember the first ones to begin the process of institutionalizing it, and I kind of understand why. It was the Khalifa al-Mustansir. Al-Mustansir in Baghdad, he built the Al-Mustansiriya madrasah because he wanted all 4 madhabs to be under one roof and to have that as sort of his boasting legacy. So he built the Mustansiriya and said and books have been written about the greatness of the Mustansiriya institution, but that was the first time someone had ever done that, where they said, okay, we're going to build an institution that has all 4 madhabs in one place. Because before in Baghdad, what would happen is, if you were looking for fatwa or to study with or to sit with or to compare fiqh with the Hanabila, that would be in one quarter of Baghdad. Then if you had to study with the Hanafis, you'd be in another quarter of Baghdad or in Al-Kufa. And then the Shafi'is and the Maliki and so forth. It's like, okay, well, why don't we have them all in one place so they can be accessed more easily? Right? Which makes perfect sense.
Yes, absolutely.
Makes perfect sense. I'd say the only exception to this rule is in Lebanon, there's a place called the Iqra Institute. And there they teach Hanbali Fiqh along with other methods, but the Hanbali Fiqh is taught there at that institution, the Mahad Iqra. That is, I'd say, an exception to the rule, where you can go there and study at the Iqra Institute. Yeah, that's probably the only exception. The rest of it, I'd say, is you're going to Jawami' or you're going to masjids or the houses of people. But the Iqra Institute, I'd say, is probably the only exception to the rule.
And regarding Al-Azhar al-Sharif, now, the Hanabla, do they teach it within the university itself, or is it outside in the masjid of the university?
There's a place where they teach called the Rawaq, the balcony or the veranda, and they when they teach there, they'll be teaching the fiqh on that veranda area. Now the teaching happens there 4 days a week, and then there's also other teaching that's been done, and I'm not sure if he's doing it right now because of the lockdowns and all the stuff that's happened, but Sheikh Sa'ad al-Najjar is also a faqih in the madhhab who teaches in Al-Azhar, but he kind of has his own maktab. where he
Okay.
teaches from and things like that. So that's also there at Al Azhar. There's there, and then there's people that also teach off of the campus. In addition to that, so you have sheikhs that teach off of campus, because it's not just on Al Azhar that you would learn the fiqh, but there's other places in Egypt as well where people stay in the north. In the
Right.
south, I'm not sure, because the south from like Suhag all the way down, you didn't mainly Malikis, although there's some Shafis. It's top heavy with Malikis once you start going from that point. But when you get deep into South Egypt, which is now called Northern Sudan, there are Hanbali fuqaha that are there as
MashaAllah.
well.
SubhanAllah.
So
In place like Aswan, that's Maliki.
Aswan is Maliki, but once you go past that, you hit the
Right.
contrived border that's called Sudan, and you have Hanbali sheikhs in Durman and some in
MashaAllah.
Khartoum as well.
SubhanAllah. And
And Eritrea has Hanabila as well. I've met brothers from there, and there's some
MashaAllah.
Qudat that are from there as well. So
SubhanAllah.
Al
And
Halawi, this is a Hanbali sheikh from there.
but before this this border, Sudan was part of Egypt, right?
Yes, Sudan and Egypt were one contiguous
Right.
structure.
Since you mentioned a masjid and a ma'had, how big is the difference when we talk about the terms ma'had, madrasah, masjid? How different do we see it in types of learning?
Right. Okay, when you talk about a mahad is normally an institute in which they have a lot of knowledge compressed within a period of time.
Right.
And usually it's expected that the student will do hifz of a vast body of knowledge or intensive study, usually. Now, the kutab will sometimes come before all that. And the kutab is where you would start the kutab would be where you would start your elementary knowledge. So a lot of students would start off memorizing like small kutab, like Al-Kharidatul Bahiyya, if they're going to be studying things, or Lumatul I'tiqad, and the Jamzuri. Other kutab like this, they'd start off memorizing these small mutun and kutab. They'd learn to read and write. They'd learn to memorize Quran. They'd learn the Tajwid. They'd learn these other things. This is the kutab. Then once they understood those mutun, they do their opening usuluddin at like a madrasah into adulthood and things like this. And then when they reached a certain level, they'd go to a higher madrasah or a higher level of knowledge, right? Where they might go to a mahad, or they go to Al Azhar, they go to something else, and they'd spend a number of years fleshing out these shuruh. Now, sometimes the mahad will combine between all these things because it's to get you ready. It's more intensive. So you'll find that people, like, for example, the work that we did at our mahad kind of compressed between like the kutab and the madrasa. It's like it compressed both of them. So we were able to get at a mahad, we kind of got a head start above certain people. And so and it happened to some of the brothers that I've gone through fiqh with. They found brothers from other madhabs, like when they spoke with them, they found they were slightly ahead of them. And I'm like, how am I ahead of them? These brothers did like an 8-year alim course, whatever else. It's like, well, you have to understand what I've done and what I've taught you has been much more compressed and concentrated. So the brothers know not only fiqh, but they know a little bit of usul as well. And things like that. How did that happen? It's like, well, the methodology that I learned, I can't do anything but teach what I've learned, can I? But the brothers that have been through a madrasa system, it's much more extended, it's wider, it's longer. Right. So what's happened is they've gotten a wider, they're still going through a longer experience. They're going through a longer tube. Whereas in our case, we went through a shorter tube. And the expectations of us were more so. And a madrasa, I think you're not going to be getting as much yelling. Whereas kutab, yes, and mahad, yes, we got yelled at. We got yelled at, and the only thing they didn't do was put their hands on us, but they yelled at us. And you'll find that at the mahad, the mahad is for people who want to be there, and they're adults, so they're at least 15, 16. Whereas madrasa kutab, you might be little. You might be 5,
Right.
6, or 7, and your parents have sent you there because there's some parts of knowledge that maybe they can't teach you yet. They taught you how to read and write. They taught you some basic things, but there's some other parts like higher levels. Okay, we don't know that. We're going to send you here. So you're little, so you go
Right.
there, right? Whereas a mahad, it's like a mahad is you went there, you sought them out, and you went there.
Right.
No one called me to go to the teachers I went to. I went looking. And so the teachers are like, I don't want to hear any complaints about anything. You eat what I give you. If all we have is Nido, you just drink the Nido. If all we have is chicken with stale bread, then that's what you eat.
MashaAllah.
You're not here. You're not doing me a favor. You came looking for me, and now you're going to get it. So we get talked to the old way. We would have to sweep. I'd go home with a teacher and he'd go to sleep, and I start doing his laundry. I start washing his dishes, start cleaning his bathroom, and other things. This was stuff I didn't have to be told. It was stuff that was expected out of gratefulness and respect for these people. Because the first 3 days you're a guest. So they're lavishing upon you all the sunnah things of a guest, everything. After that, you become part of the household. You're part of the furniture.
Yes.
The kids start waking me up and like, we need to vacuum. Right? All these types of things start happening. You know, I start giving laundry lists. You need to go here and pick this up. Expectations start getting put on me because I'm now part of the household. So, you know, so that's why I tell people, listen, if you're not ready for that, you know, you might not be ready for knowledge yet, because sometimes the teachers will talk crazy to you because that's how they learn that people talk crazy to them. They're not going to curse your parents or anything like that, but they'll say, what's wrong with you? What are you doing? How many times do I have to tell you? Is there something in your ears? You know, people just would say stuff, you know, have you gone crazy? You have a jinn with you. What's wrong with you? I told you to do this. You know, or if you didn't come back with the assignment, you had 24 hours. What were you doing? Who wastes 24 hours? What's going on? The sun never wastes 24 hours. It comes up and it goes down. How did you waste 24 hours? Oh, subhanAllah.
Wow.
The language that would get used with us. Like I said, it wasn't profanity. It wasn't vile. But people just talk to us a certain way.
Oh, it is proper discipline, though.
Yeah. So now I've had people that have come to visit me from far away, right? You come and visit me. Muslim brothers from the US have come and visited me, and they've lived with me to study the ul-Aalah, to study other things. And I've expected, okay, listen, after a certain period of time, you become part of the furniture. So that means that now you take your plate. Now you do your washing. Now you do your stuff. I'll still look after your bed sheets and other stuff, but you're part of the furniture now. So you're part of the household now. So there's certain stuff you got to do. The first 3 days, I lavish everything on you. You're my guest. But now you're part of the furniture. So after 3 days, I've done my sadaqah. I've done my sunnah on you. Now it's no longer liyafa. It's no longer hospitality to a guest. Now you're part of the ahli. You're living with me.
Right. MashaAllah.
So now you got to follow my schedule. You got obligations you got to do. You got to take out the trash. When the kids are here, it's time to start putting food out. You got to help put the cups out. Right? People have seen that have become part of my brother Mahdi's come and visited me. Other brothers come and visit. They become part of the household. So they help set the ma'idah on the ground. They vacuum it off. They do they're part of the structure.
Absolutely.
That's the expectations. Now, brothers, if they feel shy about that or whatever else, it might not be the best thing, because there's expectations that sheikhs have. Brothers have said the same thing when they went to Mauritania. That they were expected to feed the camels and all the other stuff was expected to be done, right? These are the types of things that when you learn knowledge, they're expectations. And especially, I can't speak on anyone else. I can speak on the Mawalik because half of my family, that's what they are. I can speak on that. It's the same expectations. And the Hanabila, most certainly, that's their expectations. That's how they've always been from the very beginning of the students of knowledge I was around up until now. They've always been like that towards us, where they had expectations of you and you became part of the household and you had to do. That's always been there. So people have to have that. and they have to be able to, they have to excuse me, they have to be able to respect that, because that's part of the knowledge process as well. If I expect that people that come and visit and sit down, that it's time to, when we sit down, you're going to be taking some knowledge away. Some of the knowledge I'll have to teach you by showing you, like the wudu. I will physically show you the wudu.
MashaAllah.
I'll physically show you the salah. I will physically show you these things. I will physically write down what your assignment is, because that's what it was given to us. I will read it to you. So brothers that I've done the Ulum, I read to them out the Ulum. I've read it to them. Said, okay, listen, this is your page tonight. Did you record it? I didn't record it. Okay, get your phone out, record it, whatever recording apparatus. This is what I want to hear next week or tomorrow or whatever. These are the expectations that I have, because that's what was taught to us. So there's some part of your knowledge that you have to do hifz of. Maybe not all of it, but at least as a basic slave of Allah and as a basic student of knowledge, there has to be hatmun lazim and wajib. There has to be some part of your knowledge that you do have to memorize. And that will give you something to shoot for. It will create limits for you. It will give you something to busy yourself with in your day-to-day life. There's one of the things that I've always learned from the elders of the past of the Hanabila is busy yourself with your knowledge. Ibn Qayyim, rahimahullah, he said that if someone has his knowledge, he's never alone, because he always has a companion. So I never felt lonely. I've never felt, oh, I'm alone, I've got nobody. No, I've always got something to do. So these are one of the things that I would say is an advice from our elders that have given us knowledge up until now, teachers that have given us knowledge, and not just for the Hanabila, but for any teachers that are sound and show respect to this knowledge. Is things were stressed to us, emphasis was put on us, and the methodology of learning at home with teachers or learning at a masjid. This is the way of al-Qurun al-Thalath, our Salaf. This is the way. I'm not saying it's wrong to go to institutions or it's not wrong. I want people to understand that. I'm not castigating institutions. I'm not negating them. I'm not laying them low. But what I am saying is that if you go to an institution, they'll have expectations for you where you'll have to fit certain role models, and you might not. Maybe the classroom is going at a pace that's too fast for you, or maybe it's going at a pace that's too slow for you, or maybe the expectations that they have of you don't have yet. So you have to now go away and come back, which sets you back a year. So the next time you come back, you're in a year 2 class, but you only have year 1 knowledge, you see?
Right.
Versus if you were in a gathering where you were at a masjid or you were with the sheikh, it might not be like that. It might be different. It might be a case where the sheikh's like, okay, listen, you didn't do al-ajrumiyah. Well, you don't have to do al-ajrumiyah. I'll walk you through something here. Let me help you. There was one brother that started out, he came to the mosque, he didn't know any Arabic. But the teachers were forcing him, and on the way and getting him to memorize stuff and going through grammar as he was going, he wanted to learn it. Because he's having to do it along the way. But every day he's using Arabic. He just wound up learning it. He had no choice. So that's part of the flexibility of that. And then the other issue with institutions is, suppose they fall out with the government.
Right. Yeah.
Suppose they depend on the government. Exactly. If they depend on the government for their funding, or if they require from the government other things, the government can shut them down. Right. Or the government can say, you have to teach this literature. So some institutions have had pressure put on them to teach evolution or to teach other things that run contrary not only with the institution, but with the deen. So what do you do in a circumstance like that? This is part of the trade-off. Whereas if you're at home or at a local masjid or whatever, the flexibility you have is greater. So I want people to understand that I'm not castigating institutions, but when you look at going to an institution, you have to work out risks versus benefits and to think these things through.
Yeah.
If you go to Al-Qarawiyyin for 14 years, the big Maliki institution, you will get a remarkable education, no doubt about it. But what are some of the trade-offs though that you may have? Right? What do you have to think about all these things?
Right.
Are they going to force you to learn French? Do you have to learn French to use the curriculum at all? What problems are you going to have? What are your teachers going to be teaching? Will your teachers be teaching you in proper Arabic, or will they be speaking a local dialect? Well, I didn't come to learn the local dialect. I came to learn the proper Arabic. What's going on here? Right? You have to think about all these things. If you go to Al-Azhar, you have the same considerations, right? If you go to Jami Bani Abi Nur, right, you have the same considerations in Damascus. You have these issues. Versus if you went to Masjid Iman and sat in Imam al-Buti's classes at Masjid al-Iman, you don't have any of these considerations. Listen, I showed up. I'm here. I'm physically here.
Right.
If I want to go home with the Sheikh, or I said, Sheikh, listen, I want to do more Shafi fiqh classes, but listen, I have other affairs to tend to. Why don't you go with one of my sons, or why don't you go with so-and-so? Oh, great. Now you're linked in.
Subhanallah.
Now you're linked in. Right? Versus if you start getting involved in institutions, you see, there's issues that can happen.
Right.
Suppose there's a falling out.
Right.
See, then you're right. So if you go to Jami Bani Umayyah, well, subhanallah, you're on easy street. That's a Jami'. You can do pretty much anything. But if you go to Damascus University, oh, subhanallah, now you've got some issues. Maybe they say you have to acknowledge equal rights and everything. So maybe so the women that come into Damascus University, they might say they're Muslim, but they're uncovered, akhi.
Right.
And they're wearing a face full of makeup, and the dress is hiked up above the knee. Hey, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't want to come to this. If I was going to do this, I go to school in Helsinki or Antwerp. Subhanallah, if I want to sign up for that, I can see that here, right?
Right.
See, that's what happens with institutions. That's kind of the trade-off. You'll be getting some great knowledge, but there might be distractions. At an institution, because the teacher knows he's getting paid, these are things I know from students of knowledge of brothers that have gone and studied institutions. So I'm not saying something that I just think. I'm talking about students of knowledge that have sat down with me and brothers that I spoke with, we broke bread with. And they've said sometimes they go to the institution and the teacher knows he's getting paid a weekly rate. So whether he's there or not, he's going to get paid because they don't keep records of his attendance. So sometimes he's there for class, sometimes he's not. He show up, sometimes he's not. Or one brother, he went, the teacher looked around the classroom and everyone's there to study Hanafi fiqh in Sham, in that particular area. But the teacher looks at Jami Bani Abi Nur and says, well, there aren't enough of you here. There aren't enough Hanafis in this classroom here. So we've decided everyone here is studying Shafi fiqh.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
That's an institutional decision.
Oh,
versus if it wasn't an institution, you don't care whether there's 3 or 300.
wow.
We're here to study Hanafi fiqh. That's what we're going to do.
Imagine coming through like a different continent, so excited, having prepared yourself, and then fall apart when you get there.
Yes. These are the types of issues that you face. Or an institution, you come in. One brother mentioned to me, we came in and they said, yes, I've come to study. A brother had gone and studied, and he said the sheikh was killed last night.
Whoa.
The news was brought to him that the sheikh had been killed last night. I
SubhanAllah.
was like, well, now what do we do? Well, the sheikh had been arrested last night. Now what do you do? Well, what are we going to do now? And the sheikh's students that could take over the class, they're too scared to teach.
Right.
Because the teacher got killed or he got arrested. They're scared. So these are all things you have to think about. When you consider institution, understand very clearly. I want the listeners to understand this. I'm not dissuading anyone from studying an institution. I'm just asking if you're considering going home with a sheikh or sitting in a masjid learning from a sheikh versus an institution. I ask that you weigh harms and losses, or loss and benefit. I'm asking that you consider all the things. Now, if you talk about sitting with a teacher, going home or being in a masjid, there are also things to consider there, because you have to consider lodging. If you're not used to living with someone, or living with someone older than you, or dealing with the new family dynamic. Some people come from environments where they might be the only child. So they got whatever they wanted. Now they're in an environment where they have to work synergistically with people that they might not be able to do that. Then there's another group of people who maybe if they go and they live in a home environment, maybe where they're from, they didn't have to do household chores at home. Now they've got chores at someone's house and it's a complete stranger and it feels funny. Hey, I came here to study the knowledge, not do, chores or whatever else. So they don't understand the link between adab and the ilm. And that might be a hurdle for them to get over. Not everyone can get over that hurdle. Then there's some people that, right, the one-on-one knowledge that they're getting and the emphasis and pressure that gets put on them, they feel like they don't get any rest in the day because they've always got pressure on them. Or the food that the household that they're in, if it's a different ethnic food to what they're used to, and they have it every day, that particular ethnic food, it might be too much for them. Because they want to go out. I want people to understand this, so that they make right decisions.
Exactly.
Because you won't be able to go to El Bake or Kentucky Fried Chicken or Imam's Fried Chicken or whatever you like going to. If you're living with someone on a regular basis, that's what you're going to eat. You're going to eat what the household eat, whatever they decide. Because you're not in control. You become part of their household. Versus if you're in an institution, after class, you're like, okay, guys, let's go out and get something to eat. You can go and have chocolate sundaes or banana splits or whatever you want to do. If you want to go to the countryside and take a tour of the city, you can. You go to the house of a teacher, he's like, you got to get permission. Hey, would it be okay if I took a walk? No. Then what are you going to do? You're going to say, I'm going anyway? He'll stop you. I'll stop you. You can't go. Because you're part of his household, which means you're under his responsibility. So he's like, no. So some people might not be able to deal with that. It's like, hey, I'm 27. He can't stop me. Yes, he can. You're under his responsibility. Versus if you're in an institution, you're living in a dorm, 20 of you or 30 of you or whatever, you decide to go play some basketball, you go play basketball. Some sheikhs don't like modern sports or whatever. So sheikh tells you, no, that's for homosexuals and for people like that. I don't like you to do that. Don't do that. Because some sheikhs really don't like modern sports. Yeah. It's not archery, swimming, horseback riding. They don't like it.
Yeah, it's like,
they're like, no, that the basketball, what? So you have to explain in Arabic. No, that's for homosexuals. Wow. Don't play that. Only the fasiqun do that. Don't do that.
Like Imam Tawfiq al-Booth, he was asked on football, like it's a useless thing,
Yeah.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah, so some sheikhs are like that. So it's like you have to think about that because you're going to be living with them, and maybe playing football or other things like that might have been a way that you keep your fitness up.
Right.
Or do things like that. And the sheikh's like, no, that's for homosexuals. You're like, I'm not homosexual. So you have to think because you're part of his household.
Right.
People have expectations on you to go to shop for stuff, and maybe you don't know how to read the labels because the stuff is in Arabic. So you come back with the wrong chickpeas, and the chef's like, no. These aren't chickpeas. These are this. You need to bring back the hummus bunduk. These are the wrong ones. You got to go back and bring it back. And the sheikh, maybe he yells at you, and the kids are snickering, and they're looking at you and pointing. He got yelled at. And for some people, that affects them.
Right. And another thing is waking up for Fajr, so you can't sleep through.
Yes, yeah. These are the types of things because you can't tell if you're in a house where they're praying in Jama'ah.
Right.
You can't say, "Oh, I'll be there in a minute." No, there is no in a minute.
Exactly.
We're all praying our Ratiba. Now we're waiting for you. See, that's kind of the drawbacks. Same thing, in a dorm, you might be the last person that wakes up in your room, and everyone kind of has a joke and laugh. Yeah, Brother Ahmed, he's the only thing he's going to be on time for is the Day of Judgment because you can't be late to that. But everything else, he's late, right? You can't do that if you're living with a teacher and you're you can't. He's going to be jostling you. He will come and jostle you awake, or come and yell in your room, or maybe make the adhan outside of your room. You have to get up.
I remember it's like the first time I was there, it's like one of the boys can wake me up and the food is ready. Somehow I was
Yes.
like, somehow I was like,
Yeah.
I was so tired from travel. I didn't know where I was, like the food
Yeah.
is ready. It's all right.
Yeah. These are the types of things that
Subhanallah.
happen. So you have to be, it's for people that you have to think about everything,
Absolutely.
right? So the brothers that have come and saw and had an opportunity to spend time with me, they, alhamdulillah, they thought about all that
MashaAllah.
because they knew as they're making the journey, okay, this is going to be different to what I know.
Alhamdulillah.
Right? The same thing you have to think about if you go into an institution. You have to think, if you might be going into an institution that's madhab specific and it may not be your madhab. That's another thing you have to
Right.
consider.
Absolutely.
Right? So if you're a Hanafi and you're going into Al-Azhar teaches all four madhabs, but they lean on the Shafi'is. Because Salahuddin Ayyubi, when he took it over, he brought it under his authority. And Salahuddin Ayyubi is Shafi'i, isn't he? And so when they study the books, you're going to study Aqa'id al-Islam if you want to study creed specifically with them and not, outside people. If you decide it's going to be Aqa'id al-Islam or Al-Mudhakkira fil Firaq, and it's going to be Ash'a'ira. And so if you don't want to study exclusively those books, then you've got to make other arrangements.
Right, absolutely.
Otherwise, you got to be there. Or if they do stuff like there was a brother who was Hanafi that was there, and the Sheikh, he made taslim to the left and the right, and the Shafi'is normally you start making taslim after the left taslim has happened. But a brother, he made taslim with the imam, so the imam makes the taslim to the right, he makes taslim with him, makes taslim left, and a brother questioned him and said, "What are you doing making taslim, in this fashion?" He said, "Oh, well, I'm Hanafi." He said, "So you should respect the sheikh."
Subhanallah.
You see, you're in a madhab specific situation.
Wow.
Brothers are making qunut and fajr, right? You have to respect that.
Yeah.
Right? Or brothers that went to Mauritania, they have certain methodologies, right? Certain things that they expect. So if you have not seen that before, you need to acquaint yourself with that so that you don't stick out and cause problems.
One interesting about the Mauritanians that you mentioned, in Morocco, they're also Maliki and they do group fikr, but when Murad al-Hajj was alive, I believe he prohibited that because
Yes.
it was not the mu'tamad of the madhab.
That's correct.
So that would have been odd for someone coming from there thinking, it's going to be like this at that time.
Yeah, it's going to be okay. I'll go there, I'll do this. And then all of a sudden you find out you can't do that. Even qira. I think I mentioned this to you as well as other brothers. There was a brother that he'd only memorized Hafs and Asim, and he was reading on a bus. And someone next to him heard. And when he got off at his stop, one of the attendees on the bus followed him off.
Really?
And said, "Listen, your qira is wrong. I have to correct you, but I can't. I'm not going to do it in front of people because that would be embarrassing." He's like, "You've been putting alifs where there aren't alifs." Wow. And the brother's like, "No. Look, Hafs awesome." And the brother saw that mushaf, and Hafs, he's like, "No, that's wrong. Wow. I don't know where you got this mushaf from." Because you got to remember, Mauritania, Qalun and Wash, isn't it?
Yeah,
so they're like, "I don't know where you got this mushaf. It's wrong." But so he had to explain to the brother. That brother did not let up off of him until he showed him the Al-Azhar stamps at the back of the Mus'haf. Wow. He's like, "Oh, so this is okay, all right." Then he accepted it.
Subhanallah.
But the brother said, "Listen, in the future, don't recite aloud in front of people."
Wow.
He says, because you saw what happened with me. He said other people might not listen.
Unbelievable.
So you have to think about all these types of things when you visit different areas. If if you're visiting an area that's peculiar to your madhab, then there's no issues then, are there?
Absolutely.
Then your only issues then are the local customs of the people. So the people might have a certain custom. So if you go to somewhere like Ruhayba or Duma, the primary thing there is agriculture and farming. So if you look at, say, Ismail and Badran and people like that, their background is agriculture.
Right.
They might expect you to do some type of agricultural work for them or whatever else.
Remarkable, actually.
They might expect it, right? Because that's their background. That's where they come from. They're agriculturalists. So they might expect that maybe you do some work for them. Wow. The late Shaikh Abu Zaid, the big alim, his hands are huge because his hands were huge, rahimahullah, from working outside. And people that came to sit with him had to work outside with him. Sometimes they had to do their review while they're, outside, farming. So the sheikh would say, "Okay, tell me the introduction of Dalil Talib again." And they're putting seeds in the ground and watering them. Whatever. This is because these are the realities. Now, you have to think about that when you go into an environment like that. What are you preparing yourself? No part of knowledge is an easy skate.
Absolutely.
That's the whole point that I'm saying. That's why whether it's institution or going with someone, no part of knowledge is an easy skate. So I'm not telling brothers to do it either way. I'm saying that whether you decide to go to an institution or you decide to go to a masjid or home environment, just think it through. Make sure you've thought everything through. Prepare for those moments. Think about possible things that could happen. What if this happens? What if that? Think through all these things. Because sometimes brothers, they don't think these things all the way through. And what happens is they not only cause themselves difficulty, but sometimes they show up and cause other brothers burden. So you show up to a sheikh's dars. Let's say he's a high-ranking sheikh and he teaches the advanced kutub. And you show up and you haven't did the elementary kutub and you want to learn fiqh from him. Well, why did you come to him? You see, because now it's created a situation for him because he's like, well, I can't teach you yet because you haven't done the elementary kutub. So I've got to assign you to someone else. So you have to also know what it is you want too. What are you trying to do? That's why I always ask people that have been around me always will tell you one of the first things I always say when someone asks a question, when someone will ask me about a particular kitab, I'll always say, what are you trying to do? Because when someone says, I want to study this kitab, what are you trying to do? What exactly are you trying to do? Okay, well, I'm trying to get a better understanding of Tafsir. Okay, well, that's not going to be the book you want. You want this instead.
Right.
That's why I always ask, what are you trying to do?
So people come to you and they say, for example, okay, I want to do the Rawd al-Murdi'.
Yes.
And you would explain, have you done this, that? Have you done
that? Yeah, because I'll say, what are you trying to do?
Right.
Oh, I'm trying to do this. Okay, well, that's not the way you're going to do it.
Exactly.
There's layouts and there's curriculums for a reason so that you can complete things in a timely manner. Okay, listen, let me help you. Okay, if you're trying to do, are you starting off basic? Yeah, I'm really basic. All right, we need to start with this. Okay, all right, fantastic. Let's start with this. Okay, now listen. All right, well, once I finish that, okay, have we finished this? No, then don't ask me about that. You're asking me 2 steps ahead and you're not done with step 1.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't ask me about that stuff. Ask me about finishing this stuff first. Finish this. Okay, now this is done. Okay, now that that's done, now let's go to the next step. Okay, now we're on the next step. MashaAllah. Now we got to finish this. Right? Because that's the thing. People have ideas of what they want to do, and they have so many aspirations. And that's not wrong. It's not wrong to have aspirations, but they don't know where to start because there's so many things of knowledge that are facing them. And what you have to do, sorry to interrupt, what you have to do in that circumstances, you have to say, what are you trying to do?
Yes.
Because if you're saying, okay, my goal, inshallah, is I want to become a mufti to assist my community. Okay, well, here's the trajectory we need to get on then.
Yes.
Where are you right now in your life? Okay, well, I'm here. Okay, all right. Well, that's not yet where we need to be. So here's what we need to get on the road to where you're trying to get to. Versus if someone said, I'm trying to be a good slave of Allah and a student of knowledge to assist myself, my family, and maybe some other brothers so I can do a little dars if they need some assistance. Okay, all right. Well, here's the trajectory you need to be on for that.
Exactly.
Where are you right now? Okay, well, I know this. Okay, all right. That's part of what we need to get on the road. Let's do this, and this, and that'll get you on the road. Because each one of these things has its own road. Just as if someone said, oh, I want to be a faqih. Okay, well, that's a different road now. Here are the prerequisites for that road. Here are the prerequisites for this methodology. Here are the prerequisites to reach this part. So that way you have a better understanding of what exactly is it you're trying to do. Because many slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they might not know what they want to do. Or they know what they want to do, but they don't know how to get there. So they think they have to read all of this other thing, and they might not need to. Or they think I only need to read this, but it needs to be more actually. I learned this. Okay, that's not sufficient for what you want to do regarding this goal. That's not sufficient. Or I've read this. Okay, well, you've actually surpassed the position that you say you want to do. You're actually past that. So you might as well carry on and finish out this particular thing because you've passed that other methodology.
This whole thing that you're discussing right now, is this what's in Arabic called tartib al-ulum?
This is part of it.
Okay.
This is certainly part of it because it's understanding It's the student of knowledge or the person that's entering into the gate of knowledge. Just as much as when you've got your key in your hand and you're getting ready to walk into your house, you already know what you want to do. You already know what you're going to do.
Right, exactly.
Because you know, okay, I'm going to go upstairs and go to sleep. Or I'm going to go in, pour a glass of raw milk and drink that. Or I'm going to go in, greet my parents, pray my dhuhr, and then take a nap. Right? You already know what you want to do. Well, there's a bab to ilm. Before you walk in that bab, you should have some understanding. Okay, what am I trying to do? What exactly do I want to do? Now, the first goal should be of any slave of Allah is, okay, what's the fard ayn stuff that every Muslim needs to know? Okay, all right, I'm done with that. I finished that. Okay, now that that's done, the answers that may come from you may be, I'm content with that. I have no further questions unless things come up where I need help. Other than that, I'm content where I am. Okay, well then you stopped at the first door. Alhamdulillah. And there's no blameworthiness in that at all. That's enough for you.
That's the vast majority, actually.
That's it. That's enough for you because everyone else is a farmer, or he's a dentist, or he's an optometrist, or he's an anesthesiologist, or he's an anesthetist, or whatever he may be. Everyone will be like, okay, well, I'm content with that. I know enough to carry out my obligations for me, my family, and so on and so forth. But then there's another body who are like, well, I see that there's a gap in this area in my local community or my local people. I need to do more. I need to be able to give iftah to people because they need that assistance. Okay, all right, well, that's more doors. And you have to know the difficulties that you're going to encounter along the way.
Absolutely.
What's going to happen to me if I go this way? What do I have to give? This is another thing. What do I have to give up to reach this next goal? So you have to give up some things. Some of it might be your privacy. So you might have to make some adjustments. If you're married, your wife just has to understand. You might have to give up some sleep because you spend a lot of time researching. So you have these issues. Oh, I want to be a faqih. Okay, well, you got to give up more. What are you prepared to give up? All right, well, I've got to give this up. I've got to give that up. Right? If you in particular are someone that was a big sports enthusiast where you watched a lot of football or whatever else, you might not be able to do. You might have to just watch highlights. Yes. Because your other knowledge has greater requirements of you now.
Absolutely.
So it's like, all right, well, all I can hit is the highlights, and you just have to suffice yourself with that, right? Then it's okay, well, I'm looking to go even further than that. Okay, well, then you're probably not going to even see the highlights. You're going to hear about it from other people. Oh, you should have seen so-and-so scored, and he did this. SubhanAllah, he did? Yeah, mashallah. Then you're moving on.
Exactly.
Because your obligations is such that you don't have the time to do it.
I think you would have to take your dopamine from the books now.
Yes, these are the issues. So all of these things have doors and things that they possess certain obligations. All of them have them. And the more people understand about this, the better it is for them and the outcome, because people will know where they want to be. That's the whole point. It's just like when someone walks into a place where you work out or lift weights. Sometimes sometimes people get angry. Oh, those people, they're stupid. They're not stupid. They're just confused because someone walks into a room and they see cast iron weights and machines. And the head trainer comes up and says, hello, how can I help you today? Good morning. I started out wanting to lift weights, but now that I'm here, I don't really know where to start. So what does the trainer say? He says, what are you looking to do? Oh, well, I mean, I think I was looking for weight loss as my main goal. Okay, all right. Well, then we want to get away from the machines. We want to go over here. Are you looking for weight loss? Are you looking to put on muscle? No, just weight loss and toning. Oh, okay, all right. Well, now all of a sudden things start to clear up for him.
Yeah.
Because the questions he's asking, I'm looking for weight loss and toning. Okay, or I'm really scrawny. I'm looking to put on weight and muscle. I'm looking to put on size. Okay, all right. Well, then we're going to need to go over and we're going to do this. Yeah, I've been struggling with my diet as well. Well, let's work on your diet. Let's talk about how many grams of protein are you getting a day? What? So I have to start talking about what are micronutrients? What's a micronutrient? Okay, you've come to the right place, buddy. Let me talk to you about micronutrients.
As a practical example, I once spent a few years training very hard at bodybuilding, and this coach was basically a champion of 1999, and he asked me, what do you want to train? I said, I want to bulk up. And he
Yes.
tortured me. He really tortured me. I regretted asking that.
Subhanallah.
So I got what I asked for, but subhanallah, it wasn't easy.
Yes, yes. And this is the thing is, the key is to try to get everything that you can, but to also understand what you're going to give up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to understand what it is you're going to do. What are you trying to do? Right. How are you going to do it? And what's the end result? And sometimes people come into the knowledge like how the man walks into the weight room. He's like, he knows that he wants to do something, but he's so overwhelmed by everything he sees.
Yeah.
And that's where the personal trainer or the sheikh or the muallim says, okay, good morning. What are you looking to do? Oh, I thought I knew what I wanted to do. Now I'm just confused. Okay, well, tell me some of what your goals are. Well, my fitness goals are such and such. Well, in this way, my ilmi goals, goals are, okay, all right. Well, that sounds pretty good, right? So the fitness trainer would say, can you do any push-ups? Just to see where you are, right? In terms of the muallim, he'd say, have you memorized any Quran?
You're right.
Have you learned any hadith? Have you learned? Well, I did a little bit back in the day, but then I left it. Okay, all right. Well, let's see how much is still in there, right? That's the thing. People have to look at, what are my goals? What am I trying to accomplish? What do I hope to accomplish? What are my goals? What are my wider thoughts on what it is I want to be? Right? Is it something where I'm just trying to benefit myself, or I'm trying to benefit myself and others? Because those are two different goals. So just yourself, that's fine. But if it's yourself and others, it's more sacrifice.
Absolutely. There was one thing you mentioned before that I still want to ask you about. You told us about the institutes, and when they're connected to the governments, that some things can go wrong. So the Hanabila, and you mentioned the Maliki as well, the masajid, the books, and the ilm that they used to talk, this was supported by something which we call the Waqf system, right?
That's correct.
And this was by people donating, private donors, and this is how they used to keep the ilm going without the government intervention.
This is correct. So endowments or the Waqf is what would happen is wealthy donors, private donors would put forward large amounts of wealth towards the building of institutions, or they'd give sadaqah. Sometimes people would give sadaqah who had halal wealth, and they'd give it a sadaqah to put towards a project. So Muzaffar al-Kawkabdari was a Hanafi sultan who was in Iraq. And he was Hanafi. He had no connection to it, but he, for some reason, knew of the great wali of Allah, or Abu Umar al-Maqdisi, who laid the foundation slab for what would become Jami al-Hanabila. And he wound up dedicating some wealth towards it. Now, the first time he came, he sent one of his attendees, and Abu Umar al-Maqdisi refused it. He said, this come from a doubtful source. So the man had to travel all the way back on horseback from Sham to Iraq, hundreds of miles, and go back and say he's refused it because he says it's doubtful. So Muzaffar al-Din al-Kalkabadari went through his things and found out, okay, these aren't doubtful. So he goes back, and the foundation slab has by this time been laid, and now the walls and everything get built up. And this was the beginning. So Abu Umar al-Maqdisi never had to worry about the Syrian governors or anybody else interfering, because it was a private donation that was given, although by a ruler, it was private. So he never had to worry about anybody. The Dayr al-Hanabila, which is up from there on the mountain of Qasyun, they never had to worry about anything, because that was money that came from the father of Abu Umar al-Muwaffiq al-Qudan, right? And then other people that also donated from Iraq, people that donated from Egypt and other places, they never had to worry about this because it was always private. And when you have these private donors and you're self-sufficient, you see, if the government pours money into an institution, you don't give them what they want, that's value for money wasted. They come and they close you down.
Right.
If they pay your pensions, They come and they close you down. It's like certain institutions have been so connected to the government. Now the government's saying, well, because these sheikhs aren't doing what we want, we're just going to cut their pension because you're actually an employee of the government. You're a civil servant.
Wow.
So when you clash with them, they pull your money. Whereas if you're going to plan on speaking the truth or whatever else, you have to have a level of independence where that can't happen. You have to have that. So as an example, when they went to Ghouta and they asked the Muraji of Duma, well, what about the demonstrations? They said, well, no, the demonstrations are haram. They shouldn't be done because the fitna that they're bringing. So the government said, oh, well, then you acknowledge us. They said, well, no, we don't acknowledge you either because the fitna and everything else has been brought. So the government attacked Duma. They attacked and damaged Al-Jami al-Kabir, which was rebuilt 3 years later.
Was this one
with private donors?
Was this one Imam Ismail ibn Badran was hurt, or was this another?
That was just before.
Okay.
He got hurt just before.
SubhanAllah.
And then Imam Abdul Rahman al-Shami, he barricaded himself in his house because things got really crazy. So these things happening, right? The rebuilding of the Jami al-Kabir was private donors.
SubhanAllah.
Because you have to remember, as I said before, the Jami al-Kabir was a fire worshippers temple originally. These people came into Islam. They were real mukhlisina lahuddin, a mass conversion.
SubhanAllah.
Duma converted in mass. So they know best about their condition. So when you have these types of situations, Qatar is an absolute monarchy. And they said that the Hanbali Madhhab is the Madhhab until the day of judgment. Okay. But sometimes they've fallen foul of the government, said some stuff that they're not supposed to say. They've fallen out.
The state of Qatar is upon the Madhhab of the Hanabila.
Yeah. And so sometimes they said some stuff and fallen foul of the government and got in trouble, right? Same thing with Bahrain, gotten in trouble. Three of the Emirates of the 7 Emirates, 3 of them, the Madhhab is the Madhhab of Muhammad, 3 of them. And they've gotten in trouble. And those are also 3 of the more rural Emirates as well. And they're said to be the more quote unquote conservative. But nonetheless, they've gotten in trouble and said some stuff they're not supposed to say.
What I want to know is that in the past, for example, the Ottoman Empire, the Abbas Empire, it was run by the Hanafi Madhhab. Now, was there a case where a Khilafah was upon the Hanbali Madhhab, or did the Hanabila purposely avoid this?
Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Well, you have to understand, the Bani Umayyah, in their time, in the latter stages of the Bani Umayyah, they adopted what would come to be what we call the Maliki Madhhab today. But they adopted it not because of bringing them into the government. They adopted it because those were the qadis and the jurists under their area.
Right. Okay.
So they were kind of working synergistically with each other. And that's why the Malikis could always say whatever. For the Abbasids, when the Abbasids became Mu'tazila, the Hanafis were infected as well. The Hanabila were not, because they were outside of that structure. So that's why, because the Hanabila had always clashed with the government back and forth. For the Seljuks, the same thing. So what had happened is the Hanabila were always independent or working synergistically with Khilafah, but never intertwined with them. Because once layman rule came in, the Hanabila would have never accepted. This started with Yazid. This was the first layman to ever rule over the Ummah. And the Hanabila would never accept layman ruling without having sufficient knowledge of the Shar. But that's exactly what was happening. So this is why there's always been this back and forth between the government and them.
Since the Hanabila were supported by the Awqaf, now some other madhahib and like the Hanafis, they were not really, right? Because they were in the Ottoman Empire.
They were supported by the government.
Right.
They were supported by the government And so what would happen is the Abbasids or the Ottomans, every time they went somewhere, they'd do what? They would build one military garrison and a masjid and a madrasah. That was their goal. So they were spread by the government, by the armies. The Hanabila and the Mawalik were spread by missionaries. And so you'll find that the vast majority of the Bedou among the Arabs are either Hanbalis or Malikis.
MashaAllah.
Because it's the rank and file of people. It's the people's madhhab.
SubhanAllah.
Because of the rank and file nature of it. Right? But when you start using armies and things like this, you have to start using imposition. The issue with that is, what happens if the government falls? Then what do you do?
SubhanAllah.
So when the Ottomans collapsed, what happened to the Hanafis? Well, we can see what happened.
Absolutely.
They're still in a state of shock from what's occurred. I don't think they've properly been able to restructure yet. They will, but they've not been able to restructure yet since those events have occurred. And they don't run anywhere in terms of like Awqaf, Zakat al-Fitr, things. They don't run anywhere. They don't impact anyone on a societal level. So this is the situation. So if you're breaking the law or you're going against the fiqh or doing something like that, they can't punish you. They can't enforce anything on you.
Oh yeah.
Because they don't have any teeth.
Allah, SubhanAllah.
They have no teeth.
And you yourself have experienced this, right? And I myself have recently experienced this as well, that the brothers who, in many regions, who were Hanafi, there's always a lot of confusion present regarding the books, the Mu'tamad, the Marja'iyah. It's just
yes. Well, one brother even said to me once, and this a Muslim brother was saying, I'm going to study Hanafi fiqh, but if I can't get anywhere, I wanted to come back to you.
Okay.
I said, well, listen, as I always say to people, this is a decision you have to make, because I don't want people saying that he made me this. I didn't make anyone anything. People have to make a decision themselves. So he went and he had been discussing Mu'tamid, and he was comparing and saying, well, Brother Abu Ja'far, he had mentioned this, and he mentioned the method that we use for establishing Mu'tamid. And the brother said, well, in the Hanafi Madhhab, there's no such thing as a Mu'tamid in that way. And the brother got scared. He's like, SubhanAllah, if there's no Mu'tamid in a systematic way to know. He said, nah. He said, I've got to, for the sake of my family, I need to have some type of structure. So he decided, I'm gonna make a change and follow this, because I need structure for my family. I need structure for my wife. I need structure for my children. I need something. So this level of confusion that's there has caused a lot of internal issues, and it's something that they would need to come together to create a panel of muftis to say, okay, this is the final statement. Because the ahnaf of the Arabs and the ahnaf of Al-Hind is night and day.
Right, exactly.
But even that, the ahnaf of Afghanistan, the ahnaf of Hind are different.
Turkey even like.
Yeah, so these are the types of situations. And I don't mean like branch issues, like, you'll find some of the Hanbali ladies of Palestine, they will do Rafal Yadain, maybe where the fingertips are just under the earlobes, and some the ones of Sham, the fingertips are just next to the shoulders. I understand that. That's just variation. Now I'm talking about like nullifiers, where brothers are like, listen, if the feet aren't covered in salah, salah is invalid. Other brothers are no. If they're uncovered, it doesn't matter. So these are like real issues, man, that have to get sorted.
SubhanAllah.
So there's a level of systemization. I'm not saying there's no variety and you have to all be robots, but I'm saying the stuff that are nullifiers there should be a certain level of uniformity for the laity. The laity shouldn't be saying, should the feet be or shouldn't they be? The laity shouldn't be like that. The laity should be, this is what we're doing. We see anything different, we're asking questions. That's it.
It's unfortunate, but I know a Turkish brother, and he literally told me that he was traumatized by this. Because it just was so difficult these days, to establish the Mu'tamad, to just to just follow just basics correctly. This is
Yeah.
unfortunate, and I believe you wrote about this as well, that some Ahnaf came to Imam Ahmad al-Shami, right,
Hmm.
asking for fatwa,
Yes.
and he went through the kutub and he said that he couldn't organize them, or what was the exact cause?
Yes, this issue, rahimahullah, is he tried to create some type of systemization for them,
Hmm.
but what he wound up doing is giving them his rulings
Okay.
because because by trying to find their books, he tried to study their books to get to the bottom of what the query was
Right.
for them. But he found the level of ambiguity was so great that he wasn't able to.
And we're talking about Damascus, right?
Yes, this is this area. So it's like, listen, the ambiguity is too much,
Hmm.
and you have to remember that the Ahnaf are so small, and they don't have big numbers in Sham.
Hmm.
The Hanafi Madhhab is not dominant in Sham or Arabia or North Africa. It's not dominant in those areas. So there are some in let's see, Lebanon, and there are some in Palestine, but not in big numbers.
Right.
Right. So Abdul Ghani ibn Ismail al-Nabulsi, the recent saint, he was Hanafi. The big Maraja Ratib al-Nabulsi, he's Hanafi. But it's not in huge numbers. You see, like the degree to where there are Shafis, you see. So the Hanafi madaris and places of teaching, there's one. It's called Mahad al-Fatih,
Right.
right?
Mashallah.
So that's good, but it's
That's
not
good
enough
space.
to resolve so many of the issues that they need resolved. See, it's not enough.
And we're also not taking a dig at the Hanafi madhab in any way, right? So
No,
people
because
understand this issue.
yeah, because the thing about it is no one doubts the level of knowledge of Imam Raghib and Nabulsi. No one Ratib and Nabulsi. No one doubts his ilm. He's a because he was vouched for by Imam Ismail ibn Badran. He's marja. No one disputes this, and no one's disputing one of the sheikhs that I had the chance to learn from. Sheikh Muhammad Fuad al-Barazi. He's a Hanafi. He's a Hanafi from Hama. Excuse me, from Hama. No one disputes his ilm. Tremendous scholar.
MashaAllah.
All right, so that's not open for dispute. The issue is because the Hanafi sheikhs were so intertwined with the Ottomans.
Right.
After 600 years, when the Ottomans nosedived, the shockwave of that affected the Hanafi brothers as well. And it's a cautionary tale to not get too tied up. You see, because the Shafi'is had the same thing when Muhammad Ali Pasha swept down from Macedonia and wiped out the last of the Mameluke. It had an impact on the Shafi'is in Egypt. They had to reorganize in Egypt because you put all of your you invest a lot in the government. It's going to happen to you again. So they had a hard time in Egypt. They had to go through a restructure. And then it also affected the economy in Egypt as well, because Muhammad Ali Pasha tried to enforce the Hanafi Madhhab on Egypt and some of their agricultural policies from the Ottomans, because you got to remember the Ottomans are a massive empire, everything else. He tried to impose this on Egypt. There started being crop failures. There was a famine. You see, because they didn't know how to implement it. This fiqh had never been implemented. Now, Ahmad Shakir, who was the big Ahmad ibn Muhammad Shakir, the big Hanafi alim, he pushed to have the Hanbali fiqh be the transactional structure of Egypt, which it was. It became the transactional structure, and it stayed like that since then in transactions. That's why when you have an Eid happening on Friday as well as Jummah, so you got two Eids on one day, that they're not following the other method. They're following the position of Al-Bahuti and others.
Subhanallah.
Because transactionally, it just makes sense because of the leniency and other things like this. And what Ahmed Shakir said, it just makes sense that way.
Ahmed Shakir, was he a marja?
He was a big Hanafi. He was a big Hanafi alim. Yeah, big Hanafi alim. He wrote. I have piles of his books. He was a very bright man. And his father, Muhammad Shakir, another Hanafi, was actually Qadi over Egypt and Sudan. And this was huge because he was a Hanafi Qadi. So there's very, very small amount of Hanafis in Sudan and Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
But his love for fiqh and for knowledge, it just
Mm-hmm.
put him a cut above a lot of other scholars in his time. He was a great man.
MashaAllah.
Ahmed ibn Muhammad Shakir was a great man. He died 1358. He was a great scholar.
MashaAllah.
A great scholar.
And just one thing about Egypt, you do have the four madhab there, but as to the majority madhab, is that the Shafi'i one? And then how does it build off from the
Well,
madhabs?
when you look at Egypt, is one of the few Muslim countries that has all four.
Mm.
You're going to find Hanbalis in the north
Mm-hmm.
and some along the way to Minya. You'll find them there. You'll find some Hanafis in the north. You'll find Shafi'is all throughout, okay, going all the way up to Sohag. Then you start getting to Sohag and Fayoum, and it starts becoming all Malikis. Right? And so that's the dominant amal of the people when you start getting past that point. Once you start hitting what's known as the Sa'id, the Sa'id Masr, the amal of the people is the Maliki Madhhab. And it's so ingrained, you know, some of the people might not even know that it's the Maliki Madhhab. They just know they said that's our amal.
Right. Yeah,
That's what we
exactly.
found. They might not use the word madhab. They just say that's
Yes.
our amal. That's what we do. They don't know anything. Just like when I was in Arabia and I was talking to some of the locals, they were just madhab and stuff like that. They were like, huh? Because they're just that's our amal.
Right.
That's what we do. That's what we know.
Exactly.
You know, so when Yusuf al-Qaradawi, he was in Qatar, and he said that there's a difference of opinion about praying in Jama'ah for men being wajib. He said it's up to someone whether or not they do it. He said this is sunnah, some say it's wajib. And a Muslim brother jumped up, he said, Sheikh, you're wrong. It's wajib. He said, because that's the amal that we know. You don't know what Sheikh, you're mistaken.
Subhanallah.
Because these are people, they've only known just that amal. So they don't, you try to get too technical with them, you know, the madhab, that's all they've known, but they might not know the technical terminology. They just know, what? He's saying it's not wajib. That's not true. Sheikh, you're mistaken.
The awam show no mercy at all.
Yeah, listen, you're wrong. Because the same thing happened to Imam Ahmed ibn Atwa. Ahmed ibn Atwa, who died 958. He was the first universal marja that had been sent back by Ibn al-Mabrid, or Shawaki, excuse me. He goes back and he's amassed a huge amount of knowledge. Imam Ahmed ibn Atwa, huge amount of knowledge. And so he's sharing this knowledge on comparative fiqh. And at one point, you know, a desert Arab raised his hand and said, we didn't send you away to do all that. We sent you away to benefit us. Right. He says, when you discuss things with the qadis and such, he said, then do that. He said, but we sent you away to come back and look after us. So he realized, okay, I'm not supposed to go into these comparative fiqh issues with all the lay. I'm not supposed to deal with all that. Because he was sent as the marja over all of Arabia, something that hadn't been done in that way before. Wow. So they sent him to do this. So he said, okay, well, listen, I'll just discuss comparative fiqh among these people, because the laity were just like, we don't know why you did that. So you have to keep this. You have to keep these things in mind, of overwhelming people with knowledge of fiqh, because it's true. You want to share this with everybody, but you need to make sure to share it with the people that have asked you to share it, and the people that can appreciate it. Sure. Now, your wife, when she has her childbirth, loves to talk to you about the beautiful day that the child was born, and that's good. But your wife also knows not to share with you about the labia tear and the secondary tear and having to deliver the placenta. She knows that stuff I probably don't need to talk with my husband about. I should talk about other ladies. Right. Because my husband, he won't be able to fully appreciate what it's like to deliver the placenta and all these other, the pulling of the umbilical cord. And he won't be able to fully appreciate all those things. So you have to know when people have asked you to share versus when you share with them. So all these things are important for us to be able to give people their rights and to discharge people's obligations.